If you look at any of the problems that you see down below on the page, you'll see lots of fractions. If you look at number 1, notice we've got a fraction with a binomial on the top and a binomial on the bottom. And then in number 2, we see two fractions that are multiplying each other. And each of these fractions contains both a binomial and a trinomial. So these are all examples of rational expressions. A rational expression is an algebraic expression which has an algebraic numerator and or an algebraic denominator. So basically, it's a fraction that's got an x somewhere, maybe multiple somewheres, and it can be a single x or it can be any combination of like a monomial, binomial, trinomial, or even a bigger polynomial. The simplest form of any rational expression is going to be found by factoring both the numerator and denominator and reducing like factors. So something's in simplest form if it contains no common factors between the numerator and denominator. But the key word here is factors. We can only reduce factors. We can't reduce terms. So if you don't see any parentheses, you just see a bunch of adding and subtracting, you should not be crossing anything out because you're not crossing out terms. You're literally just crossing things out. You're not actually doing math. So if we actually want to do math to reduce a fraction, it has to be factored. So we're going to see parentheses, typically around binomials, and then we're going to reduce those things. So let's take a look at number 1 to see what we mean. We're asked, what is 9x squared plus 6x divided by 36x plus 24 in simplest form? And then once we've answered that part of the question, we're asked to state any restrictions on the variable. So I'll talk about that part of the question afterwards. So first of all, we look at 9x squared plus 6x, and we should probably notice that 9 and 6 are both divisible by 3. And we should also probably notice that x squared and x both contain at least an x. So we're going to factor out that monomial. So we're going to factor out the monomial 3x, which will leave 3x plus 2 behind in the parentheses. And then we'll look to do the same kind of thing in the denominator. Notice 36x and 24, they're both divisible by 12. So I'm going to take out a 12, which will leave behind 3x plus 2. So I basically started by taking the GCF out of both the numerator and denominator. So that's my first step. Then I would typically look to see, can I factor what's left anymore? But notice we see 3x plus 2 and 3x plus 2. Those are both linear binomials. There's no additional factoring that can be done there. So then the second step is to reduce common factors. So I look at the top and I see a 3 and a 12. And we all know that if that was the whole fraction, so this part of the fraction reduces to a 1 and a 4, since 3 divided by 3 is 1 and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Now also notice we've got parentheses around 3x plus 2 and 3x plus 2. That makes that entire binomial a factor. So 3x plus 2 divided by 3x plus 2 is also equal to 1. Notice there's not much left to this fraction. In the numerator, all we have left is an x, and in the denominator, all we have left is a 4. Now that we have the fraction in its simplest form, we want to state any restrictions we see on the variable. So we want to keep in mind that restrictions can happen anywhere at any point in the problem. If something was ever against the laws of math, it has to be taken into consideration. So when I look at the final answer, x divided by 4, well, any number can be divided by 4. It just might not be pretty. So that final answer, it doesn't show me any restrictions on the variable. But if I look back at the factored form of the problem, I can see if 3x plus 2 had ever been equal to 0, that would have been an issue because we would have been dividing by 0 and we know that's not allowed. So I set 3x plus 2 equal to, not equal to 0. I subtract the 2 from each side and divide both sides by 3. So I'm solving for x. And that gives me the restriction for the variable. So x divided by 4 is the simplest form of the rational expression. And the restriction on the variable is that x cannot equal -2/3.